Hello, welcome to another episode of Just Cuz, the podcast where two cousins talk about things they love.
Just cuz.
This is part two of Barbenheimer, the return of Oppenheimer.
And I'm Barbie, and he's Ken, and we are going to talk about Oppenheimer.
So, Oppenheimer is such an incredible movie in that it is the flip side of the existential coin, where Barbie is absurdism and it's surreal, whereas Oppenheimer is going out of its way to be as real as possible.
But also equally as existentialist and depressing.
Yes.
um, I have to say, I said it in the last part, but I watched Barbie and then Oppenheimer. And boy, did that make me feel Oppenheimer a lot more. It was not, I saw them on the same day, back to back. We accidentally scheduled the movies wrong, so we had to rush to the Oppenheimer theater from the Barbie theater. It was a time. Luckily, we were able to go to the bathroom during previews, but it was a day. And let me tell you, going from that high of Barbie to just the depressing reality that is Oppenheimer it was a time. It was an emotion. It was a lot.
See, I probably would have watched these movies in the same day, and I'm very lucky that I didn't because I got to really sit and stew with each. But the reason why is because I chose to drive 200 miles across my state and watch Oppenheimer in IMAX, which was the first IMAX movie that I have seen in 10 years and the second IMAX movie that I've seen ever. And let me tell you,
Wow.
wow. Wowie, wow, wow.
Wow, yeah. What was the first one you saw? Avatar?
Um, so it was around the time that I was like 7 or 8 and I was visiting a relative, and that relative brought me to see The Ant Bully in IMAX.
Oh my god. That's way better than Avatar. Okay. Well, now your list of IMAX movies is The Ant Bully and Oppenheimer.
Two of pretty much the same movie, right?
They're exactly the same. They're sister movie.
Yes. But so talking more about the IMAX experience, I was really, really hyped to see this big screen. And honestly, that was a little disappointing just because like the screen was big and it was cool. But what really blew me out of the water was the sound. And I think this movie specifically had some fantastic sound.
I think they're definitely gonna at least be nominated for an Academy Award for sound design because
Yep.
it was fucking breathtaking.
I don't know if it was just the theater that I was in, but I could feel every explosion deep in my bowels. And I loved it.
In your bowels, my god. Yeah, I guess that's an accurate description. Um, I was about to say something very bad. I won't say it.
This is a family-friendly podcast.
This is
No,
a
it's not.
family show. Fuck you. Uh, but Oppenheimer, I was expecting, we were talking about it, and I was expecting the hyper realism, which was there, but it was also, there were so many parts of this movie that were clearly J. Robert Oppenheimer's internal anxieties and feelings and thoughts, and you can see, and they're all framed in the explosion, which
Yes.
is so amazing. They start out small with splitting the atom, and then they get bigger and more fiery, and then after the bomb goes off, he's seeing the aftermath of the bomb and people's melted and burned skin and
Oh,
their carcasses. It's so awful. It's so awful, but it is so beautifully done. It's
we're getting
really
ahead of ourselves,
breathtaking.
but every time after the bomb, when they would be
Ugh.
having this a heated dialogue scene, and then the lighting would just go pure white, and the audio would almost cut out, except for
Yeah,
like
completely
the
silent.
only thing you'd need, and it was jaw dropping. It's
Yeah. When
incredible.
the bomb went off and it did that same thing, it was completely silent. And
Hmm.
then you were waiting. You were like, I know that there's going to be a sound. I know it's coming. but it took so long that you're like, is it coming? Did the
Yeah.
speakers blow out? And then all of a sudden, boom! It was, oh my
And right
God.
before that, it's I'm become death, destroyer of
Destroyer
worlds.
of Worlds. Yeah.
Fuck.
No, in the it's amazing. In the beginning when he was having sex with Florence Pugh, which side note, I felt was totally unnecessary in this
Yeah.
movie. Not Florence Pugh as a character, she's important for his trial, but the amount of sex that they're having, like, why is that necessary for this movie? It was so jarring
Yeah, you
when
could
it was
have,
started happening.
exposited that she was a mistress of his without them being naked every scene
Or
together.
you could have showed them just like being together. They didn't have to be fucking so weirdly with the Sanskrit. Like it was just odd. Anyway, when he recited that quote, I obviously know that line, like just from literature and from life, but I don't remember exactly what it's from. But I literally turned over to my friend in the theater and I said, "This Barbie has become death, destroyer of worlds." And I couldn't help myself. I'd been seeing the memes everywhere.
Barbenheimer is real, ladies and gentlemen.
It is real. They have frighteningly similar themes. It was not as different as I was expecting. I mean, it's different. They're definitely not similar movies, but
Right.
they have very similar themes of how the world is fucked up.
So I definitely want to get into the structure of this movie and the different acts, but before we get into all of that, I want to talk about maybe too many characters being in this movie. And I commend its
So many
historical
characters.
accuracy. We see so many people who are in real life, and Oppenheimer, he had a wife who, they didn't really get along that well, and he had a mistress, but a lot of these people, and I'm mainly talking about a lot of the scientists that you see for like a minute in total of screen time, they
Mhm.
probably could have been consolidated at the very
Well,
least.
I mean, I liked the scope of the movie. I didn't think they needed to be consolidated, but the fact that all of the extras in this movie were big name actors who you're like, "Oh, I'm expecting them to do something. I'm expecting them to say something." And then people like Josh Peck or Rami Malek had like two fucking lines in the whole movie. I'm like,
Yeah.
"What is happening right now?" And I'm looking at the cast list right now. I'm like, Casey Affleck was in this
Yeah.
movie. I had no idea.
No, when
Uh
Casey Affleck came on screen, the same thing with Gary Oldman. He plays the president.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until this very moment. That's on me. I was watching it and I was like, there's something familiar about this guy. I hate him. And I thought it was just that he was familiar because he was being Truman, and I hate Truman. And then I was like, oh, it's Gary Oldman. I was like, no, I don't hate Gary Oldman.
It's
No.
like, you doing this movie? Although that moment where Oppenheimer's like, I feel like I have blood on my hands. And then Truman just takes out a handkerchief. He's like, you want it?
Oh
Do you want a little
God, that was
hanky?
awful. And then when he left and he was like, whatever. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was like, don't let that pussy back in here. And I was like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah. Now, it
Fuck.
almost happened like once every 10 minutes where I'd see an actor on screen and I was like, holy shit, I know you.
Between Barbie and Oppenheimer, every single actor in Hollywood is present in these two films other than Meryl Streep, I think. Like,
Yes.
literally anyone you could possibly think of is in these movies. And
Everyone.
that's crazy.
No, yeah, it's incredible. And it's not the fact that so many people are in this movie, it's so many people are here to play. And they are really, really acting. Especially Robert Downey Jr. My goodness. You felt emotion behind him.
I didn't even know that he was in this movie until like 2 weeks ago.
Really?
I saw a YouTube video and it was like I don't remember what magazine it was for or what it was for, but he was like breaking down his role in Oppenheimer and I was like, "What?
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr.'s in Oppenheimer? Since when?" And I guess cuz I've been trying to stay away from trailers recently. I just watched only the first Barbie trailer and only the first Oppenheimer trailer. So I I guess I just didn't see it and I wasn't paying attention and I was like, what the fuck?
See, I knew some of the actors that were going to be in this movie, but I had no idea that, like, Casey Affleck or Alden Ehrenreich or so many other actors who I just saw,
Yeah.
and I was like, what the heck? I think Kenneth Branagh was the only big name that I knew was in this movie.
I had no idea that Rami Malek was going to be in this movie, and it totally threw me out. Like, he showed up, and I was like, "That's Rami Malek," and I was like, "Wait, what is he? He's a scientist. Okay, I'm back in."
Or they introduced Polka Dot Man, and there was a scene later on, and I saw him just in the background. I was like, oh, you're going to be important. I know you, Polka Dot Man.
Yeah, you're a polka dot man. I actually remember that.
It's just incredible. And again, I commend the historical accuracy, and this movie will probably be shown in history classes because of how accurate it is. But I feel like you could have still felt the same emotion with half as many characters.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly I didn't mind it other than the fact that they were all big names. Like it threw me out sometimes, like I said. But I will say before the movie came out, I was apprehensive. Because I'm always very wary of movies that glorify historical tragedies and try to humanize, monsters. I'm sorry, but
Exactly.
that's what these people are.
This was
They're
a
monsters.
monstrous act.
They're people, of course. They're not actual monsters, but you are right. They committed monstrous acts. And I'm always wary of movies trying to humanize and glorify that because sometimes humanizing that lessens the impact. Because obviously they are acts committed by humans, but sometimes it lessens the impact. And it's like, no, these are really fucking terrible things that these people did. And they killed countless people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very relieved when I saw the movie because it didn't, to me at least, it didn't feel like it was glorifying it. It felt like it was being truthful to how someone who is responsible for that kind of an act would behave and feel. Obviously, Oppenheimer, I don't know, is he alive anymore?
I doubt it, but I
I
did
don't
not
think so.
research that. But again, kind
Well,
of going off of what you were just saying, I am so glad that none of this was romanticized. They show the Trinity test, and that's kind of romanticized, and it's filmed to show, look at how awesome this power is. And I use that in the biblical sense of, like, look at how epic this power is. And after that,
awesome, not amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was very worried that they were going to romanticize or at least even show the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And I'm so
Yeah.
glad that they didn't, because that isn't something that should be romanticized.
No, absolutely
It's horrible.
not. I know that it was due to, historical accuracy and the content of this film, but I was a little saddened to see that there was no Japanese perspective in this film. There was nobody coming and saying, "Look what you did to my home. Look what you did to us as a people." In a war that was already basically over.
And I think Nolan is a culprit of that in many of his films. I'm
Mm-hmm.
specifically thinking of Dunkirk, where you never see any of the enemy's faces. And that's clearly a choice in that movie, but I think it could have probably done good to see
Mm-hmm.
not the damage done, but the emotional damage done.
I think it's really important if you're making movies like this about war, especially about historical wars where actual real people died, that you make sure to humanize the other side because throughout this movie, they're the Japanese, they're the other, they're who we're fighting, or they're the Nazis. Obviously the Nazis,
Yeah,
don't want
Nazis
to
are
be
bad.
personified. We all agree Nazis are bad. They're terrible. Uh then and now. Uh no good
Always.
Nazis. Never. To just completely other the rest of the world and focus this on America. Obviously, it's telling the story of Oppenheimer, who is American, who is here. And he often talks about his Jewish identity, which is great and very interesting, and how he, um, I can't think of the word, qualify? No.
He kind of just wants humanity to strive, whatever that may
Yeah.
mean.
Well, no, it's how he associates his identity with what he has to do in the war and all that kind of stuff and how he feels about it. But he tries not to express his opinion
Yeah.
until later, until after the bomb, when they were working on the H bomb. But I think it's a shame that, you know, Christopher Nolan centered the white man. But I mean, you know, I always get hate when I say that. People always are like, well, who else is he gonna center? Oh, this is about the guy who created it. He was a white man, blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, but it affected
Mhm.
fucking everyone.
At the very least, one scene where we see some Japanese guy talking about how he
Yeah.
ruined everything.
I'm looking at the cast. I don't think there are any Japanese people in the cast. There's no one just talking about how this affected the place that it did, because that is a huge part of the dropping of the creation of the atomic
Yeah.
bomb. It's, yeah, you're creating it for what? It's a fucking atomic bomb. You're gonna drop it on someplace.
It's
How
to
does that
kill
affect it?
people.
And obviously they try to make Oppenheimer, you know, very remorseful, feel like he has blood on his hands, have the flashbacks to um or not flashbacks, have the imagined hallucinations of people burning from the nuclear blowout and the ashen bodies. Right? He has that, but they're all white people. They're all the people that he's talking to, standing in front of. They're not the people who had actually killed.
And sure, it's trying to relate it to maybe a white audience, but again, I feel like people are empathetic. But with all that being said, let's get into the structure, because I truly believe this is Nolan's masterpiece. This is not necessarily his greatest work, but everything that he has been working on has been to make this as good as it can be. Because I saw it as like 75% Memento, 25% Prestige, just the structure itself, where you have that black and white sequence, and that's kind of the future running backward, and you're explaining it as it goes, and it gives context to the in color stuff, which is the past moving forwards.
Yeah. No, the structure is incredible, and it's so interesting. It's such an interesting way of filmmaking, and how he can get, because he knows obviously that this is going to be again a big blockbuster hit, like lots of people are going to go see this. It's so fascinating how he can make it so clear while jumping around in time, how like an audience who's not expecting that kind of timeline shifting to follow the events. And that's a credit to him. Obviously, Christopher Nolan is an excellent filmmaker.
And yeah, Nolan always has to play with time in every one of his movies, even if it isn't a
Always.
sci-fi.
Exactly. No, and it's honestly, if this exact same movie was made, what, 50 years ago, or not 50 years ago. What year is it? 70 years ago. It would have been a sci-fi.
Yeah.
This was this was the leap forward in scientific discovery, with the splitting of the atom and the creation of these weapons of mass destruction. They were sci-fi. They were only thought of in the minds of crazy scientists who poison the apples of their teachers. Like, what the fuck, man?
Is that real?
I have no fucking clue. And
I
I
should
was
have
like,
looked that up.
why are they framing him like this? Why are they framing him like a
I
sociopath? What
kind of
the
loved
fuck?
that.
I liked it.
Yeah,
No,
the
it was
very
so
first
interesting.
introduction to the character is, yeah, this guy's capable of murder. Not quite,
Yeah.
but almost.
He'll feel bad about it,
Yeah.
but he's capable of doing it. He was completely in his own right mind when he did that.
Yep.
And the cold calculation, it was all there. But no, for me it was just that was the big shift from literally walking out of Barbie, walking right in to see Killian Murphy poisoning the apple of his professor, and I'm like, what the fuck?
I could
This is
just
very
imagine
different.
Ruth from Barbie telling you that everything's gonna be okay, and then you walk 20 feet, and Killian Murphy's just like, I'll kill everyone. I'll do it.
Yeah, no, it's basically like it's like being human is hard, but it's great. And then I'm going to my gynecologist, and then here's a death apple. Die!
I'm gonna set fire to the atmosphere.
Because you slightly slighted me in front of another student. How dare you? You didn't let me go see the academic lecture.
I just connected the dots, but that's exactly what Strauss or Robert Downey Jr. character is doing the entire movie. Something super slight and
Oh
petty.
yeah. I'm sorry. Okay, this is like you don't find this out to the very end of the movie, but like or not the end, but he's talking about it the whole time. But
Yeah.
he's like he turned Einstein against me. And the entire time I'm sitting there and I'm like, "What makes you think? What makes you so fucking pretentious to think that the two greatest minds of an entire generation in the world have nothing better to discuss than you? No one gives a fuck about you. I don't even know your fucking name. Strauss, was it? Robert
Yeah.
Downey Jr.? Okay. This is Einstein talking to Oppenheimer. No one is even mentioning your goddamn name.
There are a lot of big scientists that I just know from history, and there are a lot of small scientists that I know from history. I've never heard of Louis Strauss in my goddamn life, and I
No,
never
of
will
course
after this
not.
movie, because the movie goes out of its way to say he's just a shoe salesman.
He's literally just he's just a petty bitch and he's a failed politician. He didn't even get confirmed
Mm-hmm.
into the what was it, the Supreme Court or the cabinet, the president's cabinet,
Yeah,
whatever.
whatever it was. He was just one of those men trying to vie for as much power as he could, and he tried to look, philanthropic, and he tried to look like a good guy, but at the end of the day, he was just a weasel. And maybe he wasn't like that in real life, but I loved that twist of how like you think that maybe it's science and the fear of the unknown, or maybe it's that whatever attorney, the prosecutor, Roger Robb, maybe he's the villain, but no. In the third act, it's revealed Strauss is the villain. He's the one pulling all the strings, and I loved that reveal.
Yeah, Robert Downey Jr. was he was really excellent in the role. And but Strauss was just the whole time I was sitting there and I was thinking like, "Oh, maybe this guy is just like actually evil. Like he fucking he wants to not evil, but he is of the mentality that we need to keep making the bombs, keep making more bombs, bigger bombs, uh, so that the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is going to make the bombs. Basically, it's the Cold War mentality, and the fact that all of the trial stuff takes place during the McCarthy era and the Red Scare, like it makes perfect sense, but you're thinking of his logic and you're seeing Oppenheimer's response to it, and you're just like, that's evil. Like, you can't
Mm.
justify that. You can't justify keep making these weapons. But our government apparently did because we have a bunch of.
And yeah, not only did they justify it, they justified making more and more and bigger ones, just as a deterrent, even though it clearly doesn't work. And anyway, so I genuinely loved how in this movie, and I've talked about it a little, but you didn't really know who the antagonist was. Like you could kind of guess that there was some sinister vibes coming
Yeah.
off of Robert Downey Jr., especially they edit it in a way when you first see that boardroom where Oppenheimer like humiliates Strauss, and Robert Downey Jr. gives this wry smile, and then the second time they cut back to it, Robert Downey Jr. is just furious. Like you could see the rage.
Yeah, it's because yeah, because he's like, because that time, the first time he was
Mm-hmm.
telling the story, and he was like, oh, it's fine. But the second, like, it doesn't actually matter. But then the second time it was Oppenheimer telling the story, and he was like, he was fucking pissed. And it was like, I mean, yeah, you humiliated him, but like, that that should not be
No.
his response to destroy not just your entire career, but also discredit you and ruin your chances of trying to make the world better and stopping our government from creating these
And I
monstrosities.
should have known that that's where the movie was leading up because everything is building up to the bomb of them making it. And, in the beginning, you see atoms for like 3 or 4 frames, or probably more than that, but it's just for a flash, and you see the electrons circling it, and you're like, okay, we're gonna see this bomb. And then there's like an hour afterward the bomb, and honestly, that's the most interesting part of the movie when it's all the McCarthy Red
Yeah.
Scare, the courtroom drama stuff. I loved seeing that.
Like it frames it at the beginning that like Matt Damon is the antagonist. It was so good because the whole time you're like, oh, this guy's back again. What is his name? Leslie Groves. And he's like, oh, he's such a hard ass, but like and at first you think that because they frame it this way too with the trial that he is on trial for
Mm-hmm.
being a spy, like being a Russian spy, and Matt Damon's extreme measures like kind of make sense in that context, but then you're like, oh no, that's not what this really is.
Them thinking that he's a communist and like all that he does is kind of attend some rallies just out of curiosity, just to see like, oh, maybe this is a good system for our government, as every, you know the way that America was set up was you want to be able to strive for greatness, whatever that may mean. If that means communism, fucking okay. If it works, then great. And that's all that Oppenheimer was doing. And because he attended that rally
Yeah.
and he met with Florence Pugh a few times, he's just suddenly a communist. And I love how it's just picked apart in the courtrooms. And it was dreadful to watch, but it was
I mean,
interesting.
I don't know about you, but I have studied the McCarthy era a lot because
Oh, yeah.
I studied political science in
Big fan of the
college.
Crucible.
And oh yeah, no, exactly. I was just gonna say
Yes.
that. You stole what I was gonna say. I was gonna say, but I also studied theater, and one of the biggest pieces of theater that came out of the McCarthyism era was The Crucible by Arthur Miller, and it it is just a perfect representation of the kind of temperament that was happening in that time, represented in the feminist trials, right? But when you study it more, like you learn more things, but they all really come back to that main thing is that everyone was so what's the fucking word suspicious and paranoid that everyone was a communist and that if you and the conclusion was if you were a communist then you were spying for the Russians, right? um and because they were in the Cold War. And this movie, I think, rather than being a movie about World War II, was definitely more a movie about the Red Scare and the McCarthy
Yes.
era because it was just such a crazy fucking time. I mean, not that all of these times aren't crazy. It's crazy now, it was crazy then, but no one could be trusted,
Yeah.
right?
And
Obviously,
even the
that's
government only trusting themselves and not even that because like you thought that there were spies and moles everywhere.
mhm,
But and I'm paraphrasing the line, but Oppenheimer is talking to Matt Damon and Oppenheimer is just like they're not our enemy. We need to share info with them. And then Matt Damon is just like they're not our ally either.
mhm.
It's like that is exactly why everything led to the Red Scare and this
Exactly.
suspicion
And
and no trust anywhere.
and the Cold War. The Cold War wouldn't have happened if you shared information like that. Like that's that. But what's it called? Uh, Christopher Nolan's next movie, I want him to do the Lavender Scare, which I don't know if you know what that is, but the Lavender Scare was you know, at the same time as the Red Scare, and it's basically very similar to the Red Scare, but it was like queer people, and it was were being everyone was being fired from their jobs, and it was
Hmm.
basically like
Everyone's being
if
outed.
you're queer, then you are lying to everyone, and if you're lying to everyone, then you're untrustworthy, and if you're untrustworthy, then you're spying for the communists. And
Yep.
that was the ridiculous domino effect of thinking that led to the Lavender Scare, and I'm really passionate about that because I wrote a 10-page paper about it in college.
That's definitely something that needs to be covered more in pop culture because like I know
Yeah.
about it, but I don't know any of the details or specifics.
Yeah, but it's like it's similar with the Red Scare. Like if you say the Red Scare to just a random person on the street, they're like 50% chance they know what it is. And
Yep.
that's not good because everyone needs to know how paranoid and infighty our government can become and how that can translate to the people because the Red Scare didn't just affect government, it affected fucking everyone, not just queer people. Everyone was being fired from their jobs. If you're Russian, you're fired from your job. Just like anything other than quote unquote trustworthy.
If you're not
Sucks to suck.
American, get out.
Yeah, sucks for you.
And that is probably a very good thing to state, in a movie that we should be trusting our allies because that stuff is still going on. We
Mm-hmm.
need to cooperate on a world political theater, or
Mm-hmm.
else stuff like this will keep on happening.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that we've been talking about politics for some but this movie, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Like, you can't talk about Oppenheimer and not talk about history and politics and the world.
because that's exactly what Nolan wanted people to walk out and think about,
Mm-hmm.
history and the world. And, that ending scene, which gave me full body chills, where it was foreshadowed in the beginning, where you saw in black and white their introduction, you were too far away to hear. But then when the
That
movie
is that is
ends,
that is that is Einstein, Oppenheimer talking
yes,
in the river. Yeah.
and it's again I'm paraphrasing, but they're talking about how they thought they might set fire to the atmosphere, and Oppenheimer's like, I think we
Yeah.
did set fire to the world. And the movie ends,
And he's
and
fucking right.
yeah, oh my god, because no matter what we did bomb wise, we set fire to our imagination, and now it is possible to destroy the world
Hmm.
because of what they did.
Yep. Very, very true. I'll tell you this. When I was me and my friends, we snuck a bunch of candy into Barbie, right? And we stuck a bunch of treats and shit that we were gonna eat. We didn't eat anything because we were so excited watching the movie. We didn't even think to eat anything. So then we had to rush straight into Oppenheimer. And we were like, oh, we'll eat now because we have another fucking 3 hours of fucking starving. And I completely lost my appetite. Like halfway
I'm
through the
not
movie, I was
surprised.
like, I am not going to eat a single thing. I feel sick. I feel like I'm going to throw up. This is a great movie and it's amazing to watch and it's beautiful, amazing filmmaking, but I want to throw up. And I left the theater feeling like that.
That is exactly what it was. Barbie is humanity, and then Oppenheimer is humanity.
Exactly.
It's such an incredible movie, and I think Barbie is more so a film, Oppenheimer is an experience.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think honestly everyone should go see both of these movies. You know, maybe
100%.
maybe don't take your kids to see Oppenheimer, but definitely take them to see Barbie. But everyone else, you should see both of them
Hmm.
because they're not just a meme, they're not just those two houses in Santa Monica, which are fucking hilarious, but they are both quintessentially human and important.
We joke with this, the meme of Barbenheimer, but it's real. I walked out a changed man. Like it was nothing short of a religious experience.
I was sitting there in Oppenheimer and I turned to my friend next to me and I said, "It's crazy how similar the themes are in these two movies." Like I was not expecting this at all.
Two different sides of the coin.
Exactly, exactly. One is pink and pop bubblegum and the other one is Death Destroyer of Worlds.
And they're both cinema.
Hmm. It's also crazy that nobody planned for these to come out at the same time. Nobody
No,
planned for any of this, and it's such a strange cultural phenomenon that came out of nothing and then happened to have evidence behind it. It happens to be supported by the films themselves, which is fucking crazy.
And social media took that and ran, and I'm so glad that they
Fucking
did.
man. Yeah.
Yeah. Go watch Oppenheimer. Go have your bowels exploded by that bomb.
Why do you keep saying vowels?
Because it shook them.
Jesus.
Every time when you saw the light of the explosion and then you felt the sound. Like obviously light travels faster, so that's just scientific, but it blew me away. It had my jaw on the floor every single time.
And your bowels on the floor, apparently.
Well, the contents of my bowels on the
Yeah.
floor.
Oh, okay. So you shit. So I was throwing up. You were shitting. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what this movie did to us. It was almost like. Never mind. No, I'm not gonna say it.
Family friendly.
Family friendly. Yeah. Barbenheimer, 2023. Did you survive it? We did.
And with that, this has been a podcast of worlds, destroyer of death.